really appreciate being part of this session. I'm assuming my voice is loud enough without the microphone. Is that okay? I'm very happy for this to become an interactive session. I can talk, so it will not, so please engage to make it an interactive session. It is designed to be so, but I will fill the space available. So do make this interactive.
Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate actually having to think harder about this than I, as a process. When I was preparing this talk, I had lots of things I thought I wanted to say about my experience, about where I've come from, and why this is so important to me.
Okay.
And I realised none of that is very important, so I haven't put any of that on the slides. I can talk about things if they would like, if they're relevant. I can say a little bit about a lot of my view of this has been changed because of time working in very low resource environments, and where the standard, the mathematics I grew up with, how I grew up as a mathematician, wasn't really relevant in the same way, and so it really made me reevaluate. And I lived in societies which were inherently more societal, or had community and strong community in a way which the society I grew up in was much more individualistic. And that relates to collaboration, of course, and thinking collaboratively. And of course, all this will come back to compassion and thinking about mathematics in a very different way. So the thought experiment I'd like you to just think about is, to start this off, is at the moment, across the world, many people, if not most people, fall off the mathematics track. Now, as it's moving along, as you progress in mathematics, lots of people fall off and they stop enjoying it, or it stops being something which they engage with. They love. Often very young students, the whole class gets excited. Oh, thank you. Yeah. And so the thought experiment that I'd like to sort of give you is, what if, like literacy, we had 90-something% of people being mathematically minded and thinking in mathematically, and it sort of, it being, really something which the great majority of the population can do and engages with. What would our society look like? It would look quite different. And so my talk, engage in that, because that's really at the heart of the talk. And my talk consists of 6 words. That's all I've got on my slides. 6 words. We'll look at each of these together, each of these individually, and then we'll think about them together. But I'd love people to engage with these words. And of course, the first one I'd like us to engage with is competition. And really that fact that, as mathematicians, as someone who did a PhD in algebraic geometry and loved it, really, I loved it. I recognised that I was competitive all the way through this, and I liked being competitive, and I was good at it. It felt good, it made me feel good, because I was winning all the time, and I was good at it. Oh, it was good. This is part of what I loved about mathematics. And I, as a mathematician, as someone who became a mathematician, competition, I embraced it. And I don't know that many mathematicians who deep down haven't at some point in their life enjoyed the competition and the fact that it's a competitive process and that they're winning. Does that resonate? Yeah? And this is important because we're here talking about compassionate mathematics, and we're sort of saying, what would it look like if we said collaborative? And actually, we love the competition!
David, I will interject since I'm organizing this.
I would love it, thank you.
I have to admit that I started as a teenager in the Math Olympiads. I mean, that was, you know, for years I was in the Math Olympiads.
I won math competitions. I loved it. It was great.
I loved being the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, you know,
I feel seen now.
So?
I feel seen.
Good, thank you. So it's all very well us being mathematicians, wanting to talk about being compassionate, but we need to own who we are. My kids, you know, my daughter, aged 2, she didn't like eating. She wouldn't take a bite unless her grandfather or me gave her a sum. You know, so she could sort of get her hit because she could do it. You know, that competitive process that actually she likes being good at school. And she is, naturally is a very interesting word, but she's, you know, engaged because of the environment that she's in, because of the people around her. But that competitiveness is there, I can see it. Am I discouraging it? Should I discourage it? Should I encourage it? If we want to talk about this future vision of a beautiful world where everyone loves mathematics, we have to own up that we would lose what it is that really made all of us mathematicians and what we love about it. And is that something we're willing to give up? Do we believe it? You know, do we want it? I don't know. So I think competition is something which it is not good, it's not bad, but it's part of mathematics and it is inherent. And if we're looking at something which is going to be more compassionate, which is going to be more collaborative, we have to face up to that. We have to give up on something. We can't have it all. And I don't know what that looks like, I don't know what this means, but it is part of the reflection that I think is important for us to actually own. Anyone want to contribute? Any thoughts on competition? Yeah? Great. Oh, thank you.
Grow up and grow out of competition to be compassionate.
So that's a wonderful thing. I'd love to actually, I think we'll get into that more deeply. So is it that the competition is part of the formative process and you grow out of it and then you become compassionate? I don't want kids to be compassionate. I don't want to have them to wait until they're older to be compassionate. So there's an interesting question.
You have to go through certain stages of growth, and competition is excellent when you're 14, and it really adds a lot of energy.
Absolutely, I don't
You
disagree.
need that.
But do you need it? If you need it, not everyone can win. For everyone who wins, everyone else has lost. You know, this is the thing. If we're talking about being collaborative, really collaborative, we might have to give up on the mathematicians being the winners. That might have to be something that we recognize and we give up. I hear what you're saying. Maybe we can accept that it's only us as mature mathematicians, we can be compassionate. But as students growing up, you can have the competition, you can have your fun. I still love it.
Right.
No,
Good point.
I play games with my kids and I still win quite a lot. Even against my kids. and it's an actual conscious decision. That, I sometimes accept that I don't play well, but I like to play well. I am competitive, it's part of the way. So, there was another hand there and another hand there, please, thank you.
Yeah, so there is competing, how to say, against others, but there is also competing, I don't know, with mathematics.
Oh, thank you.
Where the rival is mathematics itself.
So, you have hit on my puzzles, which is exactly, that's very much, I get to that and I agree, but there's also a competing with others. So there's competition as an individual, there's a team sport, and we can do this in maths and other things as well. So there's competing with others, there's competing against the maths itself, which I've called here puzzles. Yes, let's get to that. So there, and then there, and then there. Yeah, this is great.
I appreciate you raising this really, really juicy thing. Just that I would like to just thank you for the fact that I feel like I'm often in spaces where like we recognize that we want to be sort of humanize the subject, and we want to treat people well, and people want to be treated well, we want to be treated well, and everything, but like there's no acknowledgement of the fact that there exist features of mathematical culture that are in tension with that. So I appreciate you explicitly naming that. I think I'll stop there for time, but yes.
Maybe the conversation later. Yeah.
There will be time for the conversation, yes.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I feel like there's always an extent to it, but I feel like competition is almost necessary in some ways for growth. Because without competition, like, I feel like you get complacent. And so, there's a level to it, but I feel like pushing yourself would need some sort of competition.
So I'm so grateful for that intervention, because I don't know if I agree with you. For me personally, I agree. That's how I grew. Could I have grown in other ways if the society, the environment was different? Are there other ways, other than competition, which could have led to that? And I don't know, is the simple answer. This is part of the real question that I would like us to actually think about, to imagine, is there a different way? I don't know if there is or not. I agree with you, that's the experience I had. That's how I grew. Might there have been another way? I don't know. These are the questions for us to ask. And so there's here and then there.
I have a bunch of things I want to say, but I want to just give a data point here of I'm someone who's very competitive in many ways, but never in mathematics. Ted's Math Olympiad childhood is my nightmare. Terrible at that kind of math. And it was not until I got to do math in a way that was not that I actually fell in love with it and absolutely miserable in that zone. As a teacher for many years, I was very negative on the math competition stuff, and I've really come around the last year or two, partly from TED, of that's just a different, equally valid way of math. It's a more popular way of doing math, and my way seems to be more of a minority, so that feels a little bit insecure for me. But then I think about, I have just two other quick responses. As an athlete, I was really into like running races and marathons for a long time. Love the competition there, and I've always found that running races brings out the best in me as an athlete because of the pressure, because of the competition. But also it helps that I was also always really good from the get-go. So the first race I ever ran, I was in like 80th percentile or something. That was motivating, and that kind of builds on itself. All of the math competitions, math tests I've done, it's the opposite, and that builds on itself too. The other quick thing I want to say, just in response to what that gentleman said, of competing against the math, really resonated with me, and the thought that came to my mind is, I do a lot of rock climbing, and some of the language that people often use in climbing is talking about like fighting the cliff. And it's almost like an adversarial relationship, which on the one hand I feel that very strongly, and maybe also even doing math, I'm sort of like fighting something. It feels like that, but that also feels like that's exactly the wrong way to think about things. Like I'm somehow trying to collaborate with the cliff to get up it. And it's hard, that feels adversarial, but it's not actually my enemy. I'm collaborating with the universe to understand this theorem, to prove this theorem, and it feels adversarial maybe from how difficult it is, but it's not actually fundamentally adversarial. I actually want to be working in tandem with the universe, in tandem with the cliff. Somehow.
The puzzles, I want to dig into that much more, because that's what I feel like sort of that part is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as this is probably addition to meals. Sometimes in right balance, right, a balanced meals, there's balance and competition. When I was a kid, I mean, I would say me and my friends in elementary school, we were unbalanced with the competition to some degree. I mean, we would get set off towards class, and we literally would trip each other up and beat people to try to get to class and finish the homework before. But then after that, we would work together, and I learned from them. So, I mean, some of that obviously was unhealthy, but I did learn from them as well. And I noticed some of the students that I teach that have had bad experience with math, when they come back and they're like getting A's, it actually helps them. So I think in an appropriate measure it's good, but yeah, it can go too far too. So we should, I mean, I never try to compete with my own students. I look at it more as being as a parent, you want them to avoid things that you had to deal with, that sort of thing. So I don't know that there's one, I think it's an appropriate mix.
So, one of the things, I do work outside of mathematics. One of the things which I love is this thing called principle-focused evaluation. And in principle-focused evaluation, good principles they have an opposite, which is also good. So you're not saying one is right and the other is wrong. You're just saying we are making this choice and we understand why. And so I am not saying competition is good or bad. I'm not wanting anyone to be thinking that. I love the way this discussion has gone. But I think one of the things I was really keen for, and one of the things I've loved from the discussion, is it is something where it is complex, related to our identity as mathematicians. We have to, if we want to be collaborators, we have to face up to our own relationship with competition. And that relates to the second, which is challenge, and that's been mentioned. You know, this is your sort of, you know, one of my best students when I was in Kent, who came to Urbana-Champaign to do his PhD. For the longest time, his tagline was, he loves challenge. He loves to be challenged. You know, that's what he's looking for, and he's continued to do that. This is something which resonates with me. I love a challenge. Something, I don't want the easy route. I love to be challenged, and that is part of my identity as a mathematician, is actually facing, encouraging, seeking out challenge, has been part of what, the identity I associate. Problem solving is what we talk about in different ways, and a lot of this is about being challenged. That aha moment that comes is all the sweeter if you've been challenged to get there, if it didn't come easy. Something comes too easy, it doesn't feel as good. So challenge is also a valuable thing, and this is why I loved the talk earlier, which talked about the struggle, and the struggles in mathematics. And so I would like to here, draw out the fact that as people who have been successful in mathematics, I think it is we associate the pleasure we get with the challenge we've been through. And I think that's something which, is something, we recognize. And that, I think, then does come back to the fact that if we want this to be something which 97% of the population does, and does well, that's at odds with this. If you're wanting people to go through the challenge, you're not going to get 97% of the population. So this is this question, do we want mathematics to be something which is taught, understood, and seen and perceived? What would mathematics look like if it wasn't something which was challenging and only a few people succeeded? Now that's a genuine question we have to ask ourselves as part of our identity. I'm going to move on to puzzles because I'm slightly conscious of time, and I do want to get to the second half, because puzzles is really, it's not necessarily, as you put it, it's not being competitive against someone else necessarily. It is just that puzzle. Can we solve it? It's that competition against the maths, the puzzle we've been put forward, and it's that desire to do something clever and smart. I do a lot of work with statisticians with data in different ways. One of the things I find really interesting is that actually many statisticians who support other people with their data analysis, they love it when they get a challenge, because they're mathematical in this sort of way. And they love that puzzle. But that puzzle, and that puzzle being there, is exactly what makes the data analysis inaccessible to the majority of people who need it. And which means that, there was this study a few years ago that over 50% of journal articles and high-quality journals got their data analysis wrong. They had a problem, a serious statistical problem in their data analysis. This is top-level international research, 50% having problems in data analysis. This is a serious societal issue because it's affecting research, it's affecting knowledge, it's affecting all sorts of things. And does it come from our education system and the fact that we as mathematicians, as statisticians, we love the puzzle. We're bored if there isn't something interesting to actually stimulate us as we do the work. If it's just routine work, we're not interested. We love the puzzle. We've been trained to love the puzzle. That's what mathematics is. But does it have to be and should it? And what might it be if it wasn't? I love the fact that language was brought up. What if we really did think of mathematics more as a language? You know, languages, you can get 97% of the population, you know, engaging with a language in a constructive way to be able to use it for communication purposes. What would language look like if mathematics as a language was the basis of our education system, as opposed to this competitive, challenging series of puzzles, which we love as part of our education? What if we centered the language aspect of mathematics throughout school education and we brought everyone on that journey? And so everybody spoke the mathematical language much more formally. They were able to use a bit of rigor. And they were able to do this in ways where our whole curriculum might change, might be totally different and distinct. If language, the mathematical language, the ability to use mathematics to communicate, that could be something which could be, you know, if mathematics wasn't the problem solver, but it was the core function of mathematics, was the ability to communicate mathematically, could that be something which 97% of the population engaged with? And actually, might we have better results as societies in terms of using evidence and so on? How long do I have left?
6 minutes.
Thank you. So,
Maybe 7.
okay. So language, to me, this is one of the things that I think deeply about. If I think about what is it that I want from mathematics for society, I want a precise language to be able to communicate ideas without getting things mixed up, without information. We're able to distinguish between information and misinformation. You know, this is something where actually having a language, a sort of scientific language, that mathematics is the foundation of to do so, why shouldn't that be accessible to our whole population? Why shouldn't we make it so? I don't know. And this is a case. Yes, please.
So I'm wondering, like, to what extent some of these problems are a result of the fact that our education systems and our society overall is sort of constructed in a way to produce workers and capital as opposed to producing art and human enrichment. Like, I also love math, and I think it's a beautiful, enriching thing, but I think that there are many beautiful, enriching things, you know, like over 50% of the population hasn't read a book in the last year. Like, you know, there are lots of beautiful things that people aren't able to engage with because they go to work, they get burnt out on whatever they're doing, and they're not living full lives, the full lives that they want to live.
Absolutely. And might that be tied in with our education systems, with our societies in different ways? These are really good big questions.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, one can say we've seen that a little bit. If you look at arithmetic in the 1700s, most people didn't know arithmetic. But by the early 1900s, or, you know, once public school, more people did. But their attitudes towards math didn't change because there was that algebra and the other things that still kind of defeated them, even though their arithmetic levels were higher. So there's that competition, or that other thing that is involved there too.
Yeah, and it is true that before you had widespread arithmetic in different ways, the mathematical knowledge that was widespread was very different. And it was, you know, I have no idea. I mean, you know, these are things which, just thinking about, is the education system actually building up mathematics as it was built up historically, or is it building up mathematics as a human could engage it and engage in the language? You know, is our schooling system, this comes back to sort of how is it serving our society? What's its role in society? These are big, big questions. I am not going to give you any answers because I'm only giving you 6 words. So, you know, as long as you don't expect answers, I'll keep going with sit.
You can't even get through 6 words.
Because collaboration is key. And you mentioned, you know, with mathematics, you engaged in mathematics collaboratively, whereas you engaged in sport competitively. Now that resonates with me. I never wanted to be competitive, you know, when I sort of got into the maths in different ways. I was good at the maths, you know, in different ways, but at university I recognised that, you know, everyone around me was also good at maths, and they liked taking notes, and I didn't like taking notes, so I didn't take notes. But I did understand because I listened to the lectures. And so then the only way I'd revise is I'd use my friend's notes and I'd explain them to them. You know, so it worked very well for both of us. You know, they took the nice notes, you know, I read the notes and said, oh, this is what they mean. And between us, we learned well. It was a collaborative process. I engaged with that very early on. And for mathematics, for me, from an early stage, it was a collaborative process. So I see, as mathematicians, engaging in collaborative processes, you know, in group work and all these other things, this is something that we do as mathematicians. But we still think of mathematics fundamentally as being competitive, as being problem solving against, you're competing against the maths itself, or somebody else, or a group. And I just want to finish with this idea of compassion, because that's what the talk is about. So, the only thing I think I can add to the really interesting discussions that we've already had on this is, if we do imagine a world where the mathematical language is something which is really widely spoken in a way that it is currently not, as we would put it, that doesn't mean that we can't have competitive elements in different ways, adding value, enhancing those who want to go in that way. Might it be that we want to distinguish between the sort of formal mathematics in school that everybody learns and the maths competitions which still have their role, which can stimulate in different ways? There's no problem with having other things alongside this. And I think this question of compassion, I loved it about this question of suffering. We think of mathematics needing compassionate mathematics because we see mathematical suffering in others and maybe in ourselves. What if that was a side subject rather than the core? What if we could actually distinguish between that competitive component that needed the compassion to engage the people who wanted to engage it, but not make that about the language? Now, I do have actually more concrete ideas I've spoken about in other cases about how this might be achieved by centering data instead of calculation. But this wasn't the place to have that discussion. So thank you very much.
Maybe later.
I'm sorry I didn't have more time at the end.
So we have time at 5 o'clock.